As those of you know who normally tune in, either Nayaswami Devarshi or myself, we do these webinars just by ourselves, one of us or the other. But we thought it would be fun this evening to do this one together as we start chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita. So let's begin our webinar this evening with the prayer. O infinite Spirit, O great Masters, O beloved Guru, we bow to you all. Beloved Lord, guide our lives with thy presence. May our hearts and minds be open to receive thy wisdom from thy holy scriptures. Guide us, bless us, be always with us. I'm going to begin with a chant. Let's meditate just for half a minute or so. Inhale, tense the body. Now throw the breath out. Inhale, tense the body, throw the breath out. And relax. Let all cares and worries go as you concentrate your attention at the point between the eyebrows. Feeling space and freedom there. Inviting God and the Great Ones to guide our lives. May we feel thy joy, their presence in our lives. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome again. This evening, we're going to begin the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita discussion. As you remember, we finished off chapter 5 last week, and now we embark on a new chapter. And this topic especially is why I invited Nayaswami Devarshi to join us this evening. Is an interesting one because we're going to embark on a discussion of renunciation. What is renunciation? And what might some of the qualities be of those people who have embraced truly within themselves, within their hearts, the path of renunciation? Because all of us are renunciates if we truly are on the spiritual path, because it defines what the spiritual path is, to be a renunciate. That and some other qualities are essential for any of us who seek to find God and to dedicate ourselves to a life of God. So let me begin chapter 6. This is entitled, Swamiji has titled this, The True Yoga. Chapter 6, stanza 1. The Blessed Lord said, the true renunciate And the true yogi are those who perform dutiful actions without desire for their fruits, not those who, making no self-offering, act with ego motivation, nor those who, in the name of renunciation, abstain from action. And Swami Kriyananda goes on to explain in his commentary on this stanza, that what Krishna is speaking of here is he's making the point that has been made, of course, already by this time, that the path of action, the path of renunciation, the path of retreating from the world and the traditional renunciate's mode of living one's life in solitary by oneself, both of these paths, that of the householder, that of the monastic, each of these is valid paths, and each of them in their own way will take one to one's goal in life, to God realization. But it's as we know over the years and over the century, there's always been this question, which of these two paths is the higher of the two paths? Should I be engaged in the world? Should I be serviceful in the world? Should I do my duties in the world and engage in worldly activity, job, family, doing them righteously and doing them dutifully? Or is it better to outwardly renounce that and take up the life of solitary, one-pointed quest for God without involvement in outer dutiful action in this way? And this has been debated over, and people have taken one side of the argument or the other, but oftentimes there's been a misunderstanding that in the thought that one of the paths is better than the other path. And what Krishna is saying here is both are valid pathways to God, and that in essence, whatever pathway one takes, it must embrace this concept of renunciation in order to be successful. And renunciation is just not a matter of going off into a cave or going into the jungle or to renouncing one's worldly duties, and the opposite, engaging in the world. That too must be a path of renunciation, because when we're speaking about renunciation, what we're speaking about is not renouncing outwardly. It's really a path of inward renunciation of what? It's renunciation of ego. And it's renunciation of the attachments. It's renunciation of modes of behavior that attach us outwardly to the world at large. We know, and we've spoken already in previous chapters, how each of us are required, so long as Lahiri Mahashai said, so long as we breathe the free air of this world, we're required to offer dutiful service in the world, but we must not be attached to the fruits of that action. And proper behavior, proper action in this world is nishkam karma, action without desire for the fruits of an action. And if one can do that, whether it's engaging in worldly activity, so-called worldly activity, or whether it's living a solitary life, either of them are appropriate. One can be just as attached being solitary as one can be when engaged outwardly in the world. But yet, we must recognize that there are differences between these two approaches, and each of them has their positive side, whether if one wants to be the monastic, living a solitary life away from outward worldly engagement, it has its positive side, but it also has its negative side, as does worldly activity and engaging in the world at large, in family, career, outward service. Both of them need to have an aspect of of service in some fashion in order for us to transcend the ego. Now, if we look at one side or versus the other, we can see the outward engagement in the world at large. It naturally does have its drawbacks. We see that a person, when you're engaged in the world and all the duties you have to deal with, the hubbub of all the outward responsibilities of career and providing for one's family and fulfilling one's outward duties. And of course that is going to leave one less time perhaps to be able to engage in sadhana and engage in one's meditation and inward practices. So that is a challenge. Now, how we meet that challenge can actually be stimulating for a person, because if one is single and doesn't have those outward challenges, oftentimes we find a single person might become lazy. So consequently, sometimes we do need the outward enforcement, you might say, of a fence around ourselves, or an outward regimen in order to help us to overcome laziness, if that might be our tendency if we were to be single. Also, I think outwardly, to lead the householder life, I think one of the big obstacles that we face in that is environment. Being in the environment of being engaged in outward service, because we know that in this world, not many people truly want the divine life. How many people really seek God? There's not that many. And so consequently, by that very fact, we find ourselves often in the engagement of outward service. We find ourselves engaged in environments that may not be quite as uplifting or as supportive to the divine quest. And so that too is a challenge. Whereas if a person is single, you can find that you can, or is on the monastic path, dedicating oneself one-pointedly to that path, you can find that you can choose your environment perhaps a little bit more successfully. Also, but you find that the single path of the monastic also has its obstacles as well, because one, it not only might one become lazy and not have, because of the lack of requirement to fulfill one's duties, you also find that the single person might develop pride in that, well, I'm living the monastic life or the true renunciate life, whereas those other people out there in the worldly life, they're somewhat lesser than me. And of course, we see that sometimes happening, and we know that's not the right attitude to have, but that can begin to creep in as well. Both paths have obstacles of attachment. Obviously, the one that's engaged outwardly in the world, there's the attachment to the various things of this world, but also the single monastic life also has its attachments as well. They're a little bit more subtle. You can find that attachment to one's place of meditation, or attachment to one's routine, or attachment to the minor things that of life. You find that can be just as binding as the outer attachments of the world. So I think really it comes down to whether one follows the outward path or one follows the inward path. It's a matter of karma, and it's also a matter of temperament. But what we wanted to speak of today is whether one follows one path or another, depending upon one's station in life, one's karma in life. There are certain qualities and certain, you could say, challenges that we need to confront and overcome, that each of us are going to face, whether we follow the path of one-pointed dedication to the monastic life as an outward renunciate, or whether we engage in inner renunciation but yet engage in worldly duties. Both of them must lead to transcendence of the ego, and both of them must in some fashion or another be engaged in service to be able to overcome that tendency to think of oneself first and foremost, and yet in order to transcend that egotism to be able to serve others. The mode of that service may take a different form from the monastic versus the worldly person, but both of them must have that element as part of it and a part of their life. And so we're going to approach various qualities that were outlined by Swami Kriyananda in his book, you can find here, A Renunciate Order for the New Age. We're going to cover some of those 14 points that Swami mentions. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Nayaswami Devarshi, and he'll be starting with some of those points, and then perhaps have a few introductory words as well.
Thank you, Jaya. I think I will add a little bit to the reading from the Gita, because Swami Kriyananda Ji gave us this beautiful model of a very positive form of renunciation. We think of renunciation as what we get rid of, what we let go of, what we don't do. But this renunciate order for the new age that Swamiji gave to us talks about a very active and positive way of renouncing that really is very much in tune with the way that Krishna gave it in this reading from the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says that we cannot renounce action altogether, we must act, and he gave us the example of acting without attachment or desire to the fruits of our actions. And in other passages in Krishna's life and in the Gita, he gives a very simple explanation of how we do this, because it's a good philosophy, but it can also be impersonal and without feeling if it's just a philosophy. And the way that Swamiji gave it to us, the way that Krishna gives, is that when we act with the desire simply to please God and to give, especially to give service to others, to give to God, to give to the Guru. And this is where Swamiji really gave us at Ananda a very positive form of renunciation. Krishna hints at this in another passage in the Gita, where he says that even a leaf offered to me with devotion is pleasing to me. And that passage there describes the way of acting, which is to make every action an offering to the divine, an offering to Krishna, an offering to the Guru. And this is the highest form of Nishkam Karma, which is not just to renounce the fruits of the actions, but to make it a devotional offering. And this passage from Krishna, where he says, even a leaf offered with devotion is pleasing to me, he is saying that it doesn't matter what it is that we are offering. Wherever you are in your life, whatever karma you have created in past lifetimes, wherever you are right now, if you can start making every one of your actions that you are already performing in your daily life because of your duties to family, to children, to friends, to job and career, if you can make all of those actions as an offering to God, an offering to Krishna, to the Guru, an offering to others in an act of divine giving and love, you will find that that is a way of renouncing the ego, not by negating it, but by offering the ego into the light of the divine. In a way, this practice of offering everything to the divine, including all of our actions, in a way it's a form of just practicing for the ultimate offering, which is merging and offering ourselves back into the divine in the ultimate state of divine union or samadhi. If you, in this moment, could completely give yourself to the divine, holding nothing back, offering yourself into the divine light, you would merge into the divine because there would be no sense of holding or ego left. And so, in a way, this practice of giving everything as an offering to the divine is a practice for the ultimate merging back into the divine. Now, Jayaji touched on an aspect that I'm just going to barely touch on, but this has to do with the outward renunciation versus of the monastic versus the householder path. Paramahansa Yoganandaji said in his autobiography of a yogi something very interesting. This is only in the first edition of that great book, before his words were changed and edited by monastics. He said that the householder path is indeed the higher path. And then he added the qualification, provided one can act without attachment and personal attachment. And I myself have seen monks who have renounced the world, not Ananda monks because of the example that Swamiji gave us, but I have met monks who became very self-involved because essentially of their desire for divine freedom just for themselves, not necessarily for others. Paramahansa Yoganandaji gave what he said was the highest prayer that one can pray. It was very interesting. He said the highest prayer that one can pray to God is, Lord, give me thyself, that I may share thee and give thee to all. And so, whenever we pray, even for something for ourselves, pray also to be able to share that with others and to give it to others. And when we get into this flow of giving love, giving devotion, sharing with others, that is the greatest way of not negating the ego, but by offering the ego and dissolving it into the infinite. And that really is the way to freedom, is this positive and active form of renunciation that Swami Kriyanandaji gave to us. This book, which I would very highly recommend, even for householders, for single people, even if you are just exploring the idea of renunciation, this book very beautifully gives us some hints on how to renounce the ego and to find divine freedom. In here, Swamiji gives us certain qualities that a true renunciate expresses, and we'll talk about these. Swamiji introduces us by saying, "What I propose to do here is open the path of renunciation to all those, whether married or single, who deeply yearn to know God. What then are the marks of those whom I'd consider worthy of being accepted as true renunciates? They would be those who have achieved noteworthy progress toward the attainment of the following virtues." And he lists 14 of them. And Jaya and I will discuss some of these. I don't know if we're going to get through all 14, but we'll see. Number 1, they have no or very few attachments or desires. Very simple. They have no or very few attachments or desires. And so look at your attachments and desires. And again, this offering approach of renunciation, when you have desires and attachments, offer them to God, offer them to Krishna, offer them to the Guru. Swami Kriyanandaji told a very interesting story that tells us how to do this. He said that whenever he would see something that he wanted that was attractive to purchase, like a beautiful sculpture that he saw one time, he bought it, but then after enjoying it for a while, he gave it as a gift to someone else. And so this is one secret to overcoming attachments and desires, is not to try to cut them off, but in a way to transmute them and make them into something higher, make them into an act of giving to others. And so we work with Kriya Yoga especially, is a way of taking the seeds of our karma, which include many attachments and desires, and offering them up the spine into the light of God, doing every Kriya, as Swamiji often said, as an act of devotional self-offering. And when we offer ourselves into the light and all these little desires and attachments, in a way they become transmuted and enlightened and offered back into the divine. And so try to see overcoming attachments and desires, not just as cutting them off, but as releasing them and giving them back to the divine.
Remember what Swamiji says here. He says those who've achieved noteworthy progress. And progress is a directional thing. Don't feel that, oh, if I have a desire, that must mean I'm disqualified. All of us have desires, but you could say that, as he says, no few or very few attachments and desires. We all, obviously, in the evening we get hungry, and I have a desire for dinner, that coming up. So obviously we want things like that. But the question is, are you attached to those desires? This is the, you might say, the test that you look inside yourself. Yes, you're thinking, perhaps I would like a new kurta or a new shirt or a new pair of pants. That's a desire. But are you attached to it? That's what really makes it, is the heart engaged into that, to the point where there's a restlessness of the heart when there's a desire. You feel that longing, that pull, that string, or more than a string perhaps, a cord, a rope that's pulling you toward that. And you could say that the second quality here that Swamiji lists is one test, you might say. And the second thing that Swamiji lists here, he says, those who are, as again, renunciates, they are without anger. He says, anger appears in the heart when one's desires are thwarted. And so this is something to judge. Is those normal desires of the day, oh, I would like dinner, I want to go to, my shirt is worn and I need a new one. Are they, when they're thwarted, what arises within you? Can you accept that? Oh, the dinner's not ready yet? Okay, well, maybe it's not going to happen this evening. But how many people flame up into anger when desires are thwarted? And anger, of course, is not either angry or not angry. There's usually some measure of the dial, you might say, is turned up. And you can feel it in your heart. Isn't it so? When something happens, I've learned in my life that over the years, there are times when I've gotten angry at something. And I've always regretted it afterwards. I said, why did I allow myself to get angry? And of course, you can't beat yourself up about these things, but you do try to learn. And over the years, I've learned to be able to see those little seeds of anger when it becomes a frustration, perhaps. It starts off as a little bit of frustration. Something didn't happen that I wanted to happen, but it didn't. It was thwarted, you might say. My wish for something to happen, it was thwarted, and it was blocked. And I can feel that little seed, and I just think about it, and I try to let it go. And then you can feel it here in the heart, just that little tension that comes there, or whatever it might be. If you can catch it early, you know how it is. They say count 10, take a deep breath, those types of things. Whatever the technique is used, and you think, oh, what is that's silly? Let it go if you catch it early. But if it gets to a certain point, you find that it tends to take a momentum of its own, and it's much more difficult. But desire and anger, the two are twins. They go together. They travel the path of life together. And if you fail, sometimes we get angry. Learn from the lesson and say, resolve. I'm not going to do that again. I won't do it. I won't allow myself to get angry. And it's an interesting thing watching the life of Swami Kriyananda. I never really saw him angry, in the sense that, now sometimes that doesn't mean that a person cannot speak firmly about something. And these situations come in life where sometimes something is you might say it's a justified or a righteous feeling of anger towards something, but that anger is not really inside in the heart. But sometimes you need to speak firmly. You have children, you're raising children, and you have to speak firmly to them, not to injure themselves for their own best welfare. So that's not the same thing. But when it's motivated from inside, then you know that be careful. I know when I raised a daughter, and I made a resolution to myself that I would not, if I was angry emotionally, something that from the heart was disturbed, I wouldn't say something until I calmed down and came to a place of even-mindedness in my own heart. Then I would perhaps reprimand her, and I got better at it as time passed, until finally, I think by the time she was grown, I think I actually had achieved my goal. But you see these two, anger and desire and attachments. Anger is a measuring stick. People say, oh, I'm not attached. Take away that thing, said this or take away that, thwart their desire and see what it is. And that's it's good to look within ourselves, and sometimes we fail in these things, but then keep right on going.
I'll just add to that the negative form of renunciation is to not have possessions. Paramahansa Yoganandaji and our own Swami Kriyanandaji gave us the model. They did have possessions. In fact, if you have clothes, you have possessions. The only people who don't have possessions are the Naga sadhus who have no clothes and wear only ash. But in fact, it's not about, as Jaya was saying, not having possessions. It's about not having attachments. And so try to see everything that you have as belonging to God. And if God comes and steals it away and takes it back to himself, say, thank you, Lord, it served its purpose very well. I've always been inspired by the Indian Swami Ramdas, who practiced the presence of God at all times. He worshiped God as the Lord, as Ram. And everything that came to him, he saw as the Lord giving to him or taking away. And one day he was in the train station, and the station master did not like Swamis, so he took his lathi and started beating Swami Ramdas. And Swami Ramdas just in his writings expressed beautifully, and the Lord came and started caressing his devotee with a stick. But he also, one day he was in seclusion, he was in a cave. All of his possessions were his begging bowl, his shawl, and his glasses. And he came back one day and they were all stolen, they were all gone. He just wrote in his book very beautifully, and the Lord Ram came and took back all his belongings from his disciple this day, having attachments. And so try to see, I've seen beautifully over the years at Ananda Village, people give names to their automobiles. And when I was living at Ananda Village, I had to have a car to serve me. I traveled and did a lot of speaking and lecturing and traveling to different places. And so the car was simply a vehicle to serve the Guru, and it belonged to the Guru. And if the Guru came and took it away one day, he was just taking back what belonged to him and not to me. Same with the body. Try to see the body as not belonging to you. Try to see even your personality as not being real and not really being yours. And when we can start to have that detachment to ourself, to the body, to the pains of the body, to the pleasures, that's when we really become more and more inwardly free. And that is the deeper aspect of renunciation that is much more inward than outward. And again, as Jaya points out, the real test is when we get angry when something is taken away from us. And that is a good time to introspect and analyze and realize that yes, I was attached to having pleasure and not having pain or having this belonging. And try to, even after discovering that fact, give it to God, give it back to the Lord, and you'll find that more and more this is how you become very inwardly free. Number 3, the mark of the true renunciate. They accept without prejudice whatever life gives them and live by the principle, what comes of itself, let it come. Paramahansa Yogananda, when he talked about true inner freedom, he said that that state of freedom is moksha. He said those who reach that point are jivan mukta. And he said when you reach that state, you are not free of having karma. So you still have karmas come, physical illness and different karmas and things, but you are no longer bound by them. And I had a good friend at Ananda Village who decided that he was going to start practicing at being a jivan mukta. And so he was following this little reading that I just read, in the sense that whatever came to him, he felt, I'm a jivan mukta. What would a jivan mukta do in this situation? Well, someone stole my car. What does a jivan mukta do? He says, it's all yours, Lord. I get ill or I feel pain. What does a jivan mukta do? He says, this is all yours, Lord. This body is yours, and I'm not bound up or down by either pleasure or pain. And so Paramahansa Yoganandaji very often advised his disciples, what comes of itself, let it come. Another way he put this, he said to be cheerful under all circumstances. And by cheerful, really, I think this advice was given more to the public, but it was really mean, be in the state of divine bliss, Sat Chit Anandam, under all circumstances. And when you can feel that divine joy under all circumstances, you are free. Try this sometime as you go through the ups and downs of life. Just in the midst of pain or pleasure, introspect and try to find divine joy inside. You will find that if you practice regularly, especially if you meditate regularly, that it becomes more and more easy to find joy inwardly under more and more circumstances, eventually under all circumstances. This is really how we are able to be free and to accept what it comes of itself, is the positive way of finding divine joy within. Because when we experience that, then whatever comes will not touch us anymore. And so try to live in that state of divine inner freedom. Again, that comes by following what we've been talking about, offering everything back to God, giving service, devotion to God, to the Guru, and being non-attached to all these things of life. And you'll find that if you turn your attachment and your desire to the desire for God, because Yoganandaji said some desires are good, the desire for divine bliss is good. And you'll find that if you take these little attachments and desires, transmute them higher up the spine into the desire for divine joy, divine bliss, you'll find that again, this is the way to divine freedom.
That phrase, what comes of itself, let it come. Sometimes people interpret that sounds very passive. Does that mean that I don't respond, or I allow something to happen that perhaps isn't right to happen? It's happening in my world, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. What it means is that which comes of itself, let it come, and don't mentally, emotionally resist it. In other words, we often, the situations of this world that we find ourselves, our karma for instance, it comes to us, and there's a part within us that say, no, don't. Why does it have to be this way? And we resist it. And what happens when you have resistance? It's friction. And that friction in our life is the cause of a great deal of pain in our life, because we resist it, and unless we can accept it, of life as it is, in a sense this is being truthful, is to be able to recognize what life is, and then we take it to the next step. We respond to it appropriately, as opposed to what many people do in life is it comes to them, they resist it, and in that friction they emotionally react to it based upon their emotional likes and dislikes of life is coming to me, I don't like it, and I react to it. And that's not what we want to do. We want to accept what comes to us. This is seeing it, as Devarshi's friend said, this is coming from God. This is coming, and I accept it as your gift, Lord. It's your gift, Lord, to me. Perhaps it's my karma to myself, my gift to myself for things I put into motion, and I accept it. And in that acceptance of what is, then I act appropriately to whatever it might be. I remember years ago, not so many years ago, but a few years ago, I had a motorcycle, and one day I went down to get on my motorcycle, and it was gone, and somebody had stolen it. And I still remember to this day that immediate, that little twinge of the heart, when an attachment, which I obviously had a little bit of attachment to it, it was ripped a little bit, and I thought, oh, it's gone. And it took me about 5 seconds, 10 seconds, to sort of process it. Oh, okay, it's gone. And then, but I had to do the appropriate thing, go to the police station, file the report, etc. And it took, I regretted it a little bit, but you still have to act and do what the appropriate thing is. But you let it come. You accept it. This is what is, recognizing that. Number 4, renunciates. They never seek to justify or defend themselves, but accept all judgment by others dispassionately, as experiences given them by God for their higher good. Isn't that so like what happens in the world? They never seek to justify or defend themselves. In other words, what happens, what is the usual case? Somebody accuses you, or me, or you're accused of doing something, and the tendency says, oh no, that isn't it, that isn't what really happened, and we start to come up with rationale of why it was that we did that, and making excuses for this. We're defending ourselves. Now, we often will say, well, why are you defending yourself? And you may say, well, I want the truth to prevail, and the truth is, I didn't do it. Now, in the highest sense, maybe that might be true. Maybe you didn't do it. But nevertheless, usually what happens is there's an immediate reaction when we're accused of something, or somebody points out a fault, or something disturbs us in that way. We tend to put up a barrier and say, no, that's not so. And that's just the ego defending itself. And sometimes even if somebody says something that is true, that is true. Or perhaps we defend ourselves when it might be true, but yet even perhaps what they say is false. There is this tendency to want to correct it and say, no, it's not true. And Swami Kriyananda would say, yes, that happens sometimes in life. But he says, just take it. It's good discipline. Just let it be. And because why not? Why not? And you could sort of use that as you might say, God is speaking to you and testing you in that way. Because does it really matter? Now, if it really, really is going to matter in the sense it matters to somebody else's welfare, then maybe you want to correct it. But if it's just yourself, why not just accept it? And you'll see that it's a very, very good discipline, because in the end, truth prevails. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't, let it be. And you'll find that there's a certain ease and a relaxation comes in the heart when you truly feel inside there really is nothing here to defend. Everything stands on its own merit. And whether it's plus or whether it's minus, whether it's this way or that, you'll find that you inwardly, you can relax when that happens. He says, but accept all judgment by others dispassionately. Now, dispassionately is the exact opposite of how most people react, isn't it? It's they're passionate about their defense of themselves as experiences given them by God for their highest good, higher good. Now, if we can see, just as Devarshi mentioned about Ramdas, he's seen everything. It was just wrong. Wrong disciplining us, wrong taking back what was originally and always was his. If we can see that, everything coming to us for our own good, for our own higher welfare, as a lesson for us to be able to improve ourselves. And we find that the reactive tendency of that is part of the subjective reactive tendency of the heart, the likes and dislikes. It begins to calm, because whatever happens, it just doesn't matter. And you'll see that this is actually the case if you practice this.
Swami Kriyanandaji actually practiced this to an amazingly high degree. He told a very interesting story once, where he said that he was always receptive to truth, no matter where it came from, because he was wanting to learn, to grow. He actually said that if you find a fault in yourself, or if someone else finds that fault and exposes it, he said it's actually a cause for celebration, because he said that you have discovered something that was holding you back in some way. You didn't know it was there, and now you can release it and work on it. The story he told, he said that he had an interview, a counseling interview, with a woman who he said that she was completely crazy. And she wasn't half crazy. She was completely mentally unhinged. And even in the interview that he was discussing with her, she was very unbalanced. But in that discussion, she told him something that she saw in him, that she saw as a fault. And Swamiji just listened. He didn't react. He didn't defend. He didn't even respond, except to say, okay, I will meditate on that. Thank you. And he said that later on, when he was meditating on it, he said that she was right, that she actually did see something in him that he needed to work on. And he was very grateful for that. And so he was able to actually improve in himself because of his really deep openness and receptivity to divine truth, no matter where it came from. And this is a degree of openness and non-reactiveness and being dispassionate that is really very laudable and something that I think we should all aim for. Number 5, the mark of a true renunciate. They keep in their hearts primarily the company of God. Very beautiful, very simple, very, very easy, and very, very direct. It's something that saints of all religions have talked about, which is very simply practicing the presence of God in all situations, in all circumstances, waking, eating, sleeping, all these things. I think all of us who are part of Ananda have done many experiments with this, and just try to see this as as a game with God. God is playing hide and seek and creates all these disturbances in our mind. And rather than getting upset when we forget about the divine, just try to see it as a game that God is playing with us. And try to play the game of trying to be aware of God's presence as often as you can. I've done many experiments with this, and I'll just share one because it was a very fun, simple, and easy one. The game that I was playing for some time, and I still play it, is that I would try to see when I woke up in the morning how long it would be before I could start consciously tuning into the presence of God and the Guru. And in the beginning it was a long time. I'd rub my eyes and I'd stumble around and maybe brush my teeth, and finally I'd truly wake up and remember God and the Guru. And so the game was to try to shorten that as much as I could. And I discovered several things as I was playing this game. One was that you can indeed start to shorten that time so that even while you're still subconscious, you can start to be aware of God and the Guru. But I also discovered that the way to win this game, if you want to see it as a victory, was as I was falling asleep and going into subconsciousness, I would mentally repeat Om Guru, Om Guru, some advice that Swami Kriyanandaji gave me about trying to tune into the Guru as God inwardly. And I found that if I tuned into the Guru as I was falling asleep, I would, even in the middle of the night, if I woke up, as soon as I even just started coming out of the slumber into awareness, that Om Guru, the Guru's presence, was often, or at least more often, present in my subconscious mind. So you will find that there are many ways you can play this game of trying to be conscious and remember God in all things. And you'll find that the more that you do this, the life starts to change, because we start to change. The magnetism, the grace starts to affect us more and more deeply, the more and more we tune in to that very powerful magnetism of the Guru, of God, of that divine grace. So, as the ultimate act of renunciation, try to see even your own thoughts as not belonging to you, but as something that you can give to God. And you'll find that the more and more that you do this, the more beautiful life becomes. Even when negative things happen, all your belongings are stolen, like Swami Ramdas, you can see it as a play of the Lord. And in the end, this becomes how a life becomes very sacred, very beautiful, very inwardly freeing, is to live it always holding the hand of God and the Guru, no matter what we do in life.
A practical suggestion about this practice of keep the heart primarily in the company of God. Have you ever noticed, as I have, that during the day there's a mental conversation going on, perhaps a commentary that you're making upon life that is in the background. You see something, sometimes you're mentally commenting on it, and you might ask yourself, to whom are you talking in your mind? And years ago, this question arose in my mind as I began to see that, and I realized that that conversation was going on, the commentary was there all the time. And I began to use that, and I turned it very consciously to a discussion with God and ultimately with Guru. And I began to see, I would address my commentary on life's reactions, or my reaction to life and what was happening around me. I began to use that commentary as a way to share whatever I was experiencing with God and Guru. And so something would happen, and I would say, well, Guru, here we are again. This is another fine mess you got me into. And I would sort of approach it in that way. And I found it's a very nice practice. And rather than simply talking to myself, why not talk to God? And you could bring that in and share your life's experiences with your friend. And think of God as your friend. Think of Guru as your friend, that you're going through life together, observing it and sharing it. Number 6, true renunciate. They are indifferent to others' opinions to themselves. they are indifferent to others' opinions themselves. In other words, that are not, a person can be indifferent to the opinions of others in many different ways. One, of course, if a person is very much egoic, they're indifferent to others' opinions themselves because they're very much rooted in their own egoic sense of, well, what do they know? You know, they don't know anything. I know I'm right and they're wrong. And that might be one approach to it, but that's not what's being said here. They're inwardly with God, and so consequently, what does it matter? If they're inwardly attuned with God and Guru and their presence in life, the foibles of what's going on around them do not shake them from the centeredness they feel in their own divine self within. This is what's being referred to here. And of course, they are indifferent to others' opinions of them means that they have to have some divine contact. They have to be, that divine contact, that divine joy, that divine peace, they begin to have a taste of a divine reality. But without that inner taste of something higher, we have to be careful with this one because it can lead to a sense of arrogance if it's just rooted in the ego. So we have to have that divine contact, and in that being our reality, you might say we pick up life from the highest string, and in that becomes the reality. And then when we have that, nothing can shake us from that. When we're rooted in that divine peace, that divine calmness, that divine joy within, whatever others say, we begin to see it in perspective to that inner reality within, and it just doesn't matter. And it gives us the confidence. God gives us confidence that, Lord, you are my rock. You are my bedrock of reality. Nothing else can shake me from that. And that feeling of solidity in the Lord gives one great confidence in life that the outer vicissitudes, they no longer affect one. Now that was number 6. Let's do one more with number 7, because there are 14 of these, and if we do one more, we'll be halfway through, and then we'll just have to pick this up next week from the rest of them. So, Devarshi, you want to do one more?
And I'll just add one more comment to the previous one. There's an expression that I've always found very beautiful, which is that it is better to please the Guru and to displease the world than it is to displease the Guru and please the world. And it's just a very good guideline to life, because those who are great in this world spiritually, they are usually persecuted, and they have the displeasure of worldly people following them throughout their lifetime usually. So try to please God and please the Guru. Number 7, the mark of the true renunciate. They work without personal motive to please God alone. And this is very simple. Try to see every action as something that we're trying to please God with. Even, again, the action of taking care of our body, feeding it, taking care of its health, buying a new kurta when the old one is worn out. And just, none of this belongs to us. It all belongs to God, especially our actions. And when all of our actions eventually are just a self-offering to God in service and devotion, you will find that, as Swami Kriyanandaji and Yoganandaji often said, the instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. And when we act as an instrument of love, as an instrument of the divine in service to others, in devotion to God, then this instrument of the ego, the soul, the body, is blessed and made sacred and sanctified by that energy flowing through it.
Thank you, Devarshi, and thank you all for joining us this evening, and perhaps we'll be able to pick this up again next week.